But to just give you another perspective on this, one is to look at sectors, right, which applications are using. The other is to turn it around. What are the primarily fundamental pillars in AI? So there are actually, if you think about it, there are three primary pillars. One is the whole computer vision. How can AI algorithms make sense of images, pictures, videos, etc., and do certain outcomes, right? And then the second pillar is language. How can we understand language, chat with it, spoken language, written language, etc., and do something with it? And I'll come to all that bit later. And third is the data, right? How do you look at numerical data and then create some outcomes out of it? So these are the three primary pillars of AI. And if you now go and look at it, computer vision AI, which has progressed quite a bit over the last few years, just like others, I guess, is unlocking its own set of applications. And some of that Varsha mentioned: security, self-autonomous driving, industrial automation now, at quality checking. A lot of it is being done on the edge using cameras instead of humans. Then a lot of it goes into healthcare applications as well, computer vision. How do you read X-rays? How do you read mammograms? How do you do thermal images to do better outcomes, right? So computer vision, you can imagine whatever eyes substitute. So wherever our eyes play a role, human eyes plays a role, they are all getting automated in different forms and different level of automation depending on the problem they're solving. The second is, in that pillar, is the language part. Now again, as humans, language is a very essential part of it. So we have a whole slew of chatbots which have just unleashed themselves onto us. But then there are sophisticated use cases in it. Like in our portfolio also, we have three companies which are very verticalized, hard to build chatbots. One of them is Visa, which is trying to do this for a mental health space, which is the most difficult chatbot to build, if you will, right? So that language itself unlocks a whole set of use cases in different industries, B2B, B2C also. Third is data. So data is things like, for example, we have a company called Locus, which uses data quite a bit to optimize the entire logistics decision for companies. Or there are a whole set of AI use cases in the fintech industry, which is trying to do audit compliance, which is trying to automate some other stuff, right? So, and a lot of consumer behavior to match with what they want to see, etc. So data has again unleashed a whole new set of applications. So Varsha has already covered sectors. I thought I'll just give you a different view on looking at these sectors from a technology first aspect. So I think the question is where
it really adds color. So Varsha started on the industry level. We are talking about the actual application level. That brings me to William. William, you have a lot of exposure in China, and China always looks at the problem in a completely different way. In the US, the companies try to solve the high-level problems, and there are few companies who are doing a lot of work. China, I see it's always the other way around, where they start from the bottom up and they just flood the entire world with very innovative products. So they start with the hardware level and then have products which have actual sales value immediately. And it's a very good merger or very good solution for the people, because tech is coming from one side, hardware from the other, and then people are actually able to have tangible products to use them. How do you see it in China?
Sure, I think one of the interesting things about AI in China is that it's actually being used. So if you look at the West, whether it's Western Europe or the US, you see leadership. Definitely, US and Western Europe are ahead of China, especially in terms of algorithms. But most of that learning and understanding is stranded inside of universities or locked inside of the very large internet leaders, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, who acquired a lot of the industry leaders. You definitely have a lead in the U.S., but it's really focused on the algorithms. Whereas in China, they're definitely behind on the model side. But they're ahead on the data side. And so there's a lot more access to larger data sets in China. The labeling is done at a fraction of the cost that you can get in the US and Europe. Even by the major US players are leveraging Filipinos to do the labeling. It's still much more expensive than in China. The last point that you just made is really telling, in that if you do not leverage personalization from AI in China, running whatever type of business you're running, you're not competitive. So AI is just like like another technology that you have to have, machine learning or algorithms, or basically algorithms to help you do personalization. You're not automatically offering that personalized service to your customers, whether they be consumers or enterprise. You're just simply not competitive. So the user adoption, the customer adoption, the corporate and enterprise adoption of AI is much greater in China than in any other market in the world. And you're starting to see that bleed out because China used to go global and get its butt kicked because they're used to try and apply China best processes and user experience to global markets. But now that they can use personalization, data-driven personalization and optimization that's automatic instead of manual, you're seeing Chinese companies do well outside of China for the first time. Thanks.
Also, just to add on to what Varsha was saying, there's a lot of enterprise applications that are expected to change the way industries work. And anything to do with enterprise also needs a lot of hardware. So we've heard of this under $10 chip, which has AI on the chip itself, which makes it very, very, very fast, and it does require a cloud network and so forth. So, do you see tangible companies to invest in China for these things?
Yeah, so I mean, we're an international fund, which makes it kind of interesting and somewhat difficult to play in the China market. So the vast majority of the companies that we invest in China and across Asia that are leveraging AI are actually domiciled offshore. And we've gone and invested in over, I think 15 companies in India leveraging AI, much more than we are those in China. But we're focusing cross-border. We're seeing the go-to-market is quite a bit different. So everybody in China basically builds their own tech stack, builds their own product stack, but they're missing, an AI team. The Chinese AI startups, they provide a very narrow solution that can be plugged into an overall product or platform from their customers. And they're looking to optimize, one particular function. Whereas in the US and Europe, generally these large enterprises, SaaS companies, they're providing the end-to-end solution, but they're providing a complete solution, not just a narrow application focus. So it's the companies that in China have a very, very different go-to-market. Now, you can think about the China AI companies as not providing a complete solution, but providing a plugin, which may give them an interesting way to sell outside of China. Maybe not to the US, where folks, customers expect a complete solution, but to Southeast Asia, South Asia, other markets around the world where there's an existing localized software stack that was built up over time, but is missing that the AI module or basically it's mostly algorithms, not so much real deep tech, but algorithmic based or I don't know, call it AI light. But you're seeing perhaps some opportunity there for China to sell to the rest of the world.
Interesting. Biju, do you see any industry filing more IPs, or do you see any trends from an IP standpoint that is standing out for you? I
mean, so the IP is obviously quite very important.
Biju, who's a specialist in.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So in the IP sector, I see various trends across the jurisdictions. So in India, I see a lot of IP filing in the AI in the medical sector. Some of the companies, trying to solve various issues around the medical sector. In China, it is different sector which is filing. Manufacturing, there is a lot of AI-related filings. In US, it's different. But what I see is a common trend, which is companies collaborating through one foundation which I saw, which is doing really great, is the Linux AI Foundation, where there is a lot of collaboration happening, lots of projects happening across the globe. Companies from China, companies from US, companies from India, like Tech Mahindra is part of this Linux AI Foundation. universities collaborating with each other, and there are there are more than 50 projects which all these companies across the globe are collaborating. So there is a sectoral filing which is also seen, and there is a set of collaborative effort which is being seen, and a lot of lines of codes being produced. In fact, in 7 to 10 days, many of these foundations collectively produces one piece of types of code. So a lot of new trends are also emerging, and this is a 2017 entity. It's a non-profit, and many of the Indian universities are also collaborating with these entities. So there is a collaboration effort also happening at the same time. So that's a trend, and some of the merger and acquisition also is a big factor we should look into when we want to see the actual trends globally. So in US, you would have seen many of the automobile sector companies being acquired, small companies being acquired by bigger companies. So autonomous driving is one big factor where companies are putting their money, other than medical sector. Manufacturing is another, especially in China. So each jurisdiction gives us a different example.
Very interesting. So that brings me to the next question, which I think the audience will be very interested in. That while there's a lot happening in the AI, how do one actually put his money in this industry? So, are there any listed companies? Are there any? Is there any way for investors to get in at an early stage? Varsha, any thoughts on that?
I think you first asked about are there any listed companies? So I think the biggest
way people to kind of tiptoe in investing in any industry.
Yeah. No, I think in terms of which are the listed companies, the largest company that went public in the US was UiPath. I don't know if you guys followed that. That is an RPA automation company and had a huge listing event here in the last month or so. In terms of private companies, there are a lot of opportunities. I think Manish alluded to some of those as well. So we are seeing these opportunities at seed stage, or we are seeing them, some of them more at growth stage. So I would look at your investment lens as to where you want to focus on. And I think between seed to growth stage opportunities, there are multiple of those, whether they are in India or cross-border. Or as William mentioned, they are many of them are in Asia or even in China. In our case specifically, we found opportunities in computer vision, and this is where companies that help out with auto retail checkout. There are companies like iFi, there are companies in security like Anytime and Anyvision. They focus on camera technology for auto security checkout. So I think it depends on Anand, on the stage that you want to come in, and also to some extent the geography that you want to invest in.
Very specific answer. Thank you, Varsha. Manish, any thoughts on that?
I would have a different.
I think those companies.
Sorry, I think Varsha, we lost you a bit.
These are now things like Livebox, a much later stage, and there are some samples. There are companies like DeliveryScale.ai with the machine. So these companies are more employed and they are more.
Varsha, I think we lost you a little bit. Can you say that again? I think there's some internet issue there. So while she joins back, Manish, can you talk of any tangible companies or tangible ways of investing for our investors?
Actually, I have a response which may not help you. We often say that we are an AI fund, but we are not looking for AI companies.
Okay.
Why do we say that? Because somewhere we have lost the plot of this whole AI thing, right? We think it is the means. Actually, we think it is the end. It is actually the means. And it is like, do you ask a question? Which mobile app company I should invest in? Right? You don't ask that. Which cloud company should I invest in? So AI is a technology to enable end goal. So the way to look at investments powered by AI is to look at the end goal first. So you're invested in a breast cancer screening company, you're interested in a mental health company, or a customer interaction company, or a self-driving company, more than AI company per se. So I would say go application first and be convinced about the application use case first. And then if you are particularly interested about AI, then look at how AI is making a disruptive difference in our thesis, for example, to that use case, right? So give you an example again, if you go back to, let's say, Nirama. Nirama is a breast cancer screening in our portfolio. And they are able to find breast cancer much, much earlier than any other conventional technologies can do, because they use AI or a thermal and change the whole mode of looking at abnormal cell growth versus density-based mechanism, which other mechanisms use, right? So, clearly, so they are a breast cancer company. They are not an AI company, right? So, per se. So now to get this investment, breast cancer, huge problem, needs automation, needs this, needs that. So you check mark. Then you look at how Nirama is solving it. They are solving it much better than anybody else in the world, and they are filling in a gap which is very critical. Check mark. So that's how we look at it. We look at the global business problem, and we look at the technology, how it can really make a difference to it to come to an investing decision. So if you take that template, there are obviously tons of companies that you can find in the private space. Startups, almost every startup is using AI somewhere or the other. But understand the business use case first. Don't go don't go and invest in AI. That is a wrong thing to look at. You are to invest in businesses which may be powered by AI.
But that's a very valid point. But do you think that AI will bring an edge to such companies? Or
that's exactly what I was saying, right? That you have to understand how that makes a difference.
Okay.
So can you make a self-driving car without AI? You cannot. So we call them the AI first companies. But it's still a self-driving car. It is not an AI company.
Right.
So Nirama is also an AI first company. Without that, you cannot solve Nirama, the problem they're solving. But they're a breast cancer company, not an AI company. So what I'm trying to say is go application first, understand the application, get convinced about it, and then look at how AI or other technology is making a difference to the business use case that they're solving.
I think it's a very, very good direction, because very difficult otherwise in such a world out there for companies. William, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a technology. I totally agree. So the key with new technologies is we're looking for challenges that have probably been around for a very long time. And then how do you leverage this new technology to do something that hasn't been done before? So I'll give you an example out of India. You know, the TikTok, which is now no longer in India, but they had 200 million users spending 57 minutes a day on the platform in India. And one of the challenges that TikTok has in India, all around the world, is moderating that content, making sure that there isn't any content on there that's illegal. For example, nudity or hate speech and things like that. So TikTok went to an Indian outsourcing firm, ByteDance, and they hired that outsourcing firm to put in a moderation. And it was human moderation. They had 4,500 people, 24/7 in shifts, basically trying to keep an eye on this massive flow of content across TikTok in India. And so what the outsourcing firm did is when they met Touch, they engaged with Touch to use their machine vision, automatic analysis and tagging in real time, and also editing to replace those like 3,500 people, 4,000 people. And so, the outsourcing firm laid them all off and then just relied on Touch. And then since then, Touch has gone on to, 10x their growth, and they're working with companies like Netflix in India, Disney in India, and also English Premier League cricket, which was automatically doing connecting the clips. And so you can see your favorite cricketer bowling and batting and get those highlight reels in real time as the action goes. As an American, I find cricket horribly slow and boring. So this speeds it up for me, for everybody. So that's one example of a challenge, right? A problem or an opportunity that we all have. Post-production is very expensive and also quite slow. But you're applying, AI to this challenge and really solving a big problem.
Looks like Varsha has a connectivity problem. She's joining in shortly. I think there she is. In the meantime, Varsha, sorry we missed a part of what you're saying. Can you repeat the second half of what you're saying?
And we believe technology platforms are well played out at this point, at least in the labeling stage, some of the CNN stage, etc. So good to look at vertical applications in AI if you're looking to invest.
Very interesting. Biju, is there any way that investors can, say, track the IT filings of a particular industry or a particular company to decide to make investments in that particular company? Or is there any way of tracking the IP of a company to invest? Biju, you're on mute.
As I said earlier, each jurisdiction you have a patent filing. So the patent office is a good place where you can see where is the maximum number of filing happening in which sector and what is the value, whether there is prior art. So if there is a prior art on that technology, then you don't get a patent. Or even if you get a patent, it can be invalidated later on. So that's a good place to look at for the value and also whether patent roles are patent. So let's say I file for the patents, but it gets assigned, it is bought by some other entity. So who is buying this patent? So if all these trends will give us an understanding that what is the quality of those patents, when and also whether those patents have been filed for infringement, whether that has been asserted against various companies across the globe or in that jurisdiction. All the jurisdictions they have filed for those patents. So all these things, the data will give us an understanding, and even for patent filing, for understanding the prior art, AI is used today. So there are various platforms, and even for criminal justice, AI is being used. And the legal sector is another big place where AI can be used and has been used in some jurisdictions at least. So what I'm coming to say is that the filings in various jurisdictions is a good platform to see where is the patent filing, fight happening, in which sectors the patent fight is happening, and what is the level of prior art. So using AI itself, you can know whether there is prior art. So there are various platforms which will help you in that.
Any particular company, any particular
yes,
standing out?
Yes. So as I said, I also wear the hat of Open Invention Network, where we protect license and open source from patent tension. So what we have seen in this last 16 years of this community is where companies like IBM, Google, everybody is part of this. There are 3,885 softwares and applications which we protect on Linux and open source. And we have some 3,800 plus companies globally, startups, projects, everybody being part of this company. So we also have a defensive pool of patents. So in fact, most of our patents, I'll put in the link, are based on AI, and most of these patents are filed in US. So companies should also look at not just filing for patents, they should also look at monetizing upon this defensive patent strategies. So I would bet upon companies who don't just file for patents, who also, because filing for patents is a very costly affair, and each of those jurisdictions you have to spend money, and patent filing is not cheap. So as a company, I would like any end company which is a startup or a bigger company or if it's a project, I would bet upon whether they have joined upon defensive strategies. So something like OIN, Open Invention Network, or LOD, where you don't have to spend money. These are companies where you can join for free and also take benefit of the defensive patent strategies. So OIN has a huge patent portfolio on AI, and these companies can take benefit out of it. Even companies like Google also file patents for defensive purpose. So in case they are sued by an operating entity, then they can use this defensive patent pool to retaliate. So that should be the trend I think companies should, and as I said earlier, it should be a collaborative mechanism. Unless you don't collaborate, if you file for patents and nobody uses those patents, you are not able to license it. There is no point in that. So the Tesla mode or the Google mode of open sourcing many of those technologies and patents will be the right way forward, because more users will be there for your technology and your patents, and you will make money from filing infringement cases, but you will be making from adoption of your technologies, your patented technologies. So Tesla, Toyota, Google, all these companies have shown us the way that on fundamental technologies, which like Linux and open source, which many of the AI platforms use, should not be filing for patent infringement. Instead, they should allow more companies to use it, and from the for usage and for optimization, they should be making money, not for filing patents or filing patent infringement cases. So that is also a trend which I have seen in the IP sector.
All right, thanks, Lord Biju. For my next question, I will start with Manish. What is the critical success factor or competitive edge that you look out for when you're investing? As you rightly said, it's not a sector or it's a company which is using AI. But what is the critical success factor? What is that edge that you look out for before investing?
See, our template of investment over a period of time. Was it this question from me or Varsha? Sorry, Anand.
Yes, for you to start with, and then
we'll. Getting some feedback if other speakers can go on mute, it will be helpful. Thank you. So what I was saying is that the template that has worked for us over the last 4 or 5 years, we have been doing this, is essentially 3 things. One is the question, are you solving a large global problem, which is monetizable, of course. Second is, do you have what we call as a 10x edge? That means, is your tech in AI or beyond gives you an ability to solve that problem much better than other peer group. And third is, are you a great team which can pull this off? So our entire process is basically built around these 3 pillars. Now, when you peel these, then there are other smaller factors come in, right, or nuances come in. That what does it mean by large global market? So you do market sizing, of course. You also do what we call as a deep tech resonance map. In fact, we have written a blog on it. You can visit our website and see how we have sort of figured out a template which helps us in finding out whether the market is ready or not, and whether it's an incremental innovation or science, right? So, or not, either way. So we spend a lot of time looking at that. We spend a lot of time finding out what is the core innovation which actually can drive and solve that core need in the market. And therefore, we also look at whether they map each other or not. Sometimes the core innovation of a company and the core need of the market have an offset, right? They're not one-on-one on it. And therefore, then it leads to its own problems in scaling when the time comes, etc. So yeah, some of these factors are factors of, look at, team and market size, etc. But these are some of the other factors that we look at. We do not invest in incremental innovation, and we do not invest in science. That is very important for us. And the readiness of the market has to be there.
Thank you, Manish. William, Manish has pointed out that investing, whether in AI or any other sector, is driven by the same fundamentals that would go on for listed markets or any other markets. Do you see differences or nuances coming in across geographies?
I think the key is trying to find product market fit, right? So I mean, with Touch, we engaged with them for over a year and a half before we invested. Their initial application was trying to do like sort of shopping recommendations. So you take a picture of some shoes that your friend's wearing and you pop it in, and then you can find on local e-commerce shops something that looked similar. And the traction simply wasn't there. It wasn't solving an end user problem. The technology was not that bad. It just did not solve the end user's problem. Nobody actually was in the habit of taking pictures of their friend's shoes and then popping them into an app to try and find similar shoes. When they finally found the application of the technology, initial application that solved a really big problem, which is real-time video post-production without having manual labor. There was an immediate traction, and after they signed that first customer, we invested, and now they've basically signed up every single major broadcaster in India, and we're helping them go global. So they signed not just the football club in India, but also English Premier League and Champions League, right? So this is a pretty universal problem. Now, of course, just sports is just one application of this. If this company is going to become like a unicorn, we need to find other similar type applications. But I think there's so much video being created these days. Being able to automatically edit, analyze, and tag it and edit it is a big opportunity. So sorry about that. So I would say the key is taking the technology. Of course, the technology has to perform, but then finding that product market fit, and because as investors we're really focused on helping companies sell, so they need to have something that people want to buy, but then we help them go global. And there's a very well-worn path between Asia and the world, India to the US. Everybody wants to go out to the US market. We think what we help the companies with is expanding to Asia and selling mostly to large multinationals across Asia. So I definitely agree. The key though is to have that product market fit, having something that you can actually people are willing to pay to solve. Thanks.
Thanks, William. Varsha, we bring another perspective about the entire field of women entrepreneurship, right? So, do you see any nuances there in terms of any particular edge you see in companies run by women entrepreneurs, or anything that you look out for before you invest?
I think it's all 3 T's driven, as some of my colleagues pointed out, right? We look at the team, we look at the TAM, we look at the technology. And I think here we do see opportunities from both sides of the coin. So entrepreneurs who are either male or female. In our case, there are a few that are started by female entrepreneurs, and we want to see more of those. We have an early stage program in India now where we are helping deep tech female entrepreneurs with mentorship as well as master classes to get started. So we will see more and more companies come up in this space started by female entrepreneurs. But I think we should definitely look for what is the unique technology insight that they would bring in here, which would be sustainable, which would be measurable, or as William pointed out, will get to a very fantastic product market fit. So I think that would be a key pillar as we go through this discovery. And we definitely look to see many more women-led companies in this space going forward.
Good.
If I can just add here, right? This happened by accident, not by design. Varsha, you would also, actually we didn't know ourselves. Recently was awarded what we call as a 2X Challenge Award. Which is, and we have got it because 42% of our founders are women.
Wow.
And we didn't know this. It's not that we go and target it looking for, it just happened. But to your point, that things are changing massively. And especially for a deep tech fund, we were even more surprised because of this taboo about women in technology, which no longer exists, of course. Right? And but that's something that happened for us.
But do you find the success rates better with women entrepreneurs?
I think this is a pure bullshit question to use as word, right? There is no difference between men and women on this. It's also like a bias, right? So when we say, oh, do IIT founders get more funding? When you go and look out for IIT founders to get more funding, obviously the data 5 years later will show that IIT founders have got more funding, right? So men, women, absolutely no difference. Both are equally capable of doing everything on the planet. And
while I agree completely with you, but this the data keeps.
So Anand, I will add another thing. You are getting biased into the AI.
Right. So, Vijay, quickly for investors, when you're investing, if suppose a company says, investee company says that I have IP and all that, but you also mentioned that there has to be a lot of defensive process in place.
Yes.
Is there any pointers that we must look out for on that?
Yes.
Because a lot of people might say I have IP, but there could be infringement. There could be a lot of, I mean, it could be approved in one country but not in another. Anything that investee companies must have?
Surely. So it is not the quality, it's not the quantity of patents you own. It is the quality of patents you own determines the. So when we do a due diligence, the legal due diligence and specifically IP due diligence, we look at the quality of those patents. You might only have 10 patents, but they are high quality patents. On the other hand, some companies might have 50 or 100 patents, but they are low quality patents and there are so many prior art and it could be invalidated. So we look at all those trends when we advise for any investment. Secondly, at startup level stage, we don't look at, we don't expect startups to file for many of these patents because, as I said, it is jurisdictional, it is very costly affair. So what we also look at is what is the strategy they have taken? What is their IP strategy? So whether they have looked at from a defensive strategies, which companies like Google also take. So Google also, many of the startups have joined the community, which is Open Invention Network, and they also have joined community like LOT Network. LOT stands for License on Transfer. So I will give all those details in the the chat box here. So you guys can take a look at it, all the viewers of this conference. So what we look at also is that what is their IP strategy? How have they defended themselves? In case they have been sued by somebody, how have they tackled it? Whether they have gone and paid the license fee or they have challenged it, because so all these things we look at when we look at advising somebody to invest. So it is, as I said, it is not the quantity, it is the quality game. High-end patents, high-stack patents. We also see what is their strategy, which is whether they have also defensive patent pools. They are part of defensive patent pools, and all those things are the trends which we look at. And so, have they been able to monetize these patents? Because many companies and startups file for patents and they are not able to monetize these patents.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. One question that's especially relevant to some of our audience is, how should governments work with investors to help them shape the startup future better? So the government's aims and ambitions are very different to a classic investor. They want the community, the industry to grow in their country, and they want to facilitate whatever it takes to make sure that the industry does well in their country. So any thoughts on that? Let's start with Vidyam on that.
Yeah, sure. So we're partnered with a number of governments, from Taiwan government, Korea government, New York State government, and Hong Kong and some of Singapore. I think the challenge is, in order to build a tech hub, you need to have a critical mass of people, and also hopefully some customers, but especially capital. And sometimes it's difficult to bring those things all together in one place. So the government does play a role in trying to attract those players in. I mean, recently our biotech platform, IndieBio, they talked to Singapore, they talked to New York State. New York State ended up putting in a $25 million grant to attract IndieBio to move from London to New York instead of, say, Singapore, plus 10 million in the fund, in our fund. And so that putting together the resources, that's not something that anybody else but the government can do. Some corporates can be active there, but they're not really focused on a particular geography. So, at this point, we have a lot of choices as investors. We're a global investor. We're investing all around the world. But where do we choose to domicile those companies? I mean, India is one of the most difficult places to invest in the entire world. The tax structure is a total mess. And this is something that the government can change. But for now, I think, we've got a volume discount on redomiciling companies out of India just because, doing business there is so bad. You have companies like SAP. I mean, SAP is not a small company, and they're on record saying that they will never, ever invest in an Indian company. And so this is where the government has an opportunity. We face the same challenges with Hong Kong. Setting up in Hong Kong is not as easy as it used to be, it's everybody could always be better organized. We're having a quite difficult time helping our companies open up bank accounts in Hong Kong in spite of the task force that InvestHK has put together, and that we probably need to do a better job of interacting with them. But it is quite difficult, especially in the time of COVID, to set up bank accounts in Hong Kong and in Singapore and in other jurisdictions. So these are some of the basic things where the government can play a role and must play a role if they're to drive innovation to their home markets.
Varsha, what do you think?
I think that the government can also play a role in terms of potentially opening customer introductions to these startups. Government is a very large enterprise in any country. In India, for example, our company IdeaForge was recently awarded a very large contract from the army for drones that would get images and do visualization for security. And I felt this was a great first step from the Indian government to give such a large contract to an India-based company. Previously, these were awarded to companies from Israel or other countries. So government can take also a very active role of nurturing these companies, help them with potential customer introductions within the government-based enterprises. In addition to what William talked about, which is related to setup, taxation, etc., I think on the commercial side, the government can play a big role.
That's a very interesting perspective. I think giving business to startups is, critical. I run a company, and I think if I get business instead of just incentives, that's a far more direct way of incentivizing the startup to grow, because revenue is critical when you're starting out.
Absolutely.
Manish, what are your thoughts on that?
I just honestly feel they should stay out of the way as much as possible, right? So first you have to clean these things up, right? You have this in angel tax scenarios that so many startups had to go through last few years. You have all kinds of things thrown at the startups first that they will die before they can survive. In fact, to Varsha's point, we actually don't fund companies which are doing business with the government because it is that bad a scenario. Because they just don't pay on time. There's all kinds of problems, right? So you only very specific, like defense is one specific area where you can get your things out, but IdeaForge also took a lot of time before they could get there. So that is a scenario of India. So I think if they stay out of the way, it is better, much better. Then comes the enabling part. So if you stay out of the way, first job done, and 90% of the problem will go away. Then comes the other part. Okay, can you build up accelerators? They have done some good job on providing debt funding to a lot of accelerators, which is good, right? Then there is Fund of Fund program, actually very good. Fund of Fund program from SIDBI, which is managing the government money, is actually one of the best programs. But can we make it less bureaucratic, more faster, right? Then they had this good scheme of EDF, which was a very good scheme for government, but that got red taped again. So I think stay out of the way, number one. Number two, then go ahead to look at slightly broader areas where you can make a difference, right? Like Fund of program is good, opening up accelerators is good. Investing directly in startups, not good. I think this is one of the things that I've heard recently, that government is going to start investing in startups, etc. So all that is like not going to add value. That's my 2 cents on this.
Biju, any perspective you have on
Yes. So I agree to what Manish says. Government should only be an enabler, and the government has now an opportunity in the data protection law, which we have still not come out with. There we have a great opportunity to enable our medical sector and others to share data and collect data. So even as we go through this COVID, pandemic, we don't have the data which is collected by the government many of the hospitals across the country, which we could have used it for the second wave of pandemic or the third wave of pandemic. So that many of the startups I work with, whom I advise on the legal side, they have this problem of getting data from the government hospitals. So, so the government should only play an enabler role, and the data protection law, which has been pending for finalization for years, that will be a good opportunity for the government to enable data sharing for medical sector and various other sectors. So there is opportunity in the hands of government now. The ball is in the government's court.
I think that is very critical that what work is getting protected. I think we've seen a lot of infringements across, especially in Asia, we see a lot of that happening. But I guess governments really can help a lot there. The entire thing about being able to protect your IP, being able to file suits against it, and see some action around it is also very important. From a previous role, we used to work with a lot of HNIs who tend to invest a lot private as well. So I know a friend who invests or who is doing something, so I invest with him. And while they are also investing a lot more from the classical means of investing, like funds and fund of funds or PE funds or VC funds, they also invest a lot privately. Is there any particular tips you would give them, Manish?
You're talking about private investors?
Yeah, so classical HNIs who invest in the organized way of investment as well, but also want to invest in other. They get a lot of requests from friends, for example.
So actually, some interesting observations there, which has left me pleasantly surprised, I would say, because we are raising our second fund the last few months.
Right.
And you know, we raised a fund back in 2017 also, where we interacted a lot with private investors in India and across the world, and this time also, right, with last few months. Experience is very, very different, guys. I mean, it's amazing how many people are looking at funds as a category of investment. Right? And so that is very good to see, and I think that should go more and more, because if India has to do well, venture capital, the startups have to do well. If startups have to do well, the capital problem has to be solved in a more scalable manner. And if that's so, the venture funds have to have a slightly easier path to raise money from the domestic capital, which has been absent from the game in the last 30 years of venture capital. And I'm very pleased to say that a lot more is happening. So I would say if you're an HNI investor looking at it, good step. I mean, you can always see plenty of opportunities to invest direct as well. But if you are someone who is not plugged out, who's not plugged in with the startup investments, I would say better select a fund route rather than doing a direct investment, because it has its own, it is a little bit of a nuanced game of how you pick companies, how do you stay in touch, etc. But both options are there, and very, very good to see the amount of domestic money actually flowing in funds in the last, it's just not us, other funds managers have told me a similar thing, which is very good to see.
William, do you see any particular trends there in different jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think, well, there's high net worth, and then there's, former entrepreneurs. I think you're finally seeing this second, the first, second, third generation, not finally, but them being super active in investing. I did, when I was a stock analyst, we worked with an investment for the IPO with InfraWedge Naukri. And this is an Indian example. You can find many in China, where, they still grew their company, but they're very active in investing. I think most of every single of the founders of Tencent, also Alibaba, all have funds, and so there are the entrepreneurs who become angels, and then sometimes also VCs, and I would say they're very much a smart money, and then there are those who have lots of money but might not have that domain expertise, which I think Manish is definitely talking about. They might come up from more of an industrial side or a traditional trading background or some traditional industry or family business, and for them, go with a fund. And we, to some extent, it's called tuition, right? You pay your tuition, and hopefully you don't pay too much in tuition, but you pay some tuition and you learn by watching the fund that you're invested in. You also can write some small checks. That's how I kind of got started. I did 39 investments over 8 years with my own money, about 4 investments per year. And I learned some very painful mistakes with my own money before I started using LP money. So I'd say, think about if you're just looking at starting to invest. Yes, learn from experts, learn from funds, invest in some funds. And then also, do some smaller checks. So on the angel side, don't write big checks. I think some people, they get really excited and they write really, really big checks. And to start off with, just remember that, this money, you're basically, it's tuition. And always, you want to reserve at least 50% of the money for follow-on in the winners. And generally for the ones that are not going up and to the right, I wouldn't say that they're losers, but they're not going up in the right, to the right. Especially if you're in the early stage, it's best to not really follow on and focus on the ones that are going up and to the right. So that's my tips there. Thanks.
That's very interesting. I think the investment world we always say
organize something. So some trends I've seen in the medical technology companies are the investors come in the form of mentors first, then they watch the company for some time and then they invest, and with some tag along rights and other rights which they keep in their investment documents. So first you come in the startup as a mentor, then once you closely observe their activities, then you invest.
That's a very good.
So many of the doctors have done that.
It's a very good point, because I think what William was saying as well was if you want to really go in alone, then go in with smaller checks instead of getting excited and putting in the big checks. Because I think angel investing, this level of risk slightly higher than the listed markets, and as much as it can diversify, it will help to get a better experience over time. And then maybe you can narrow down to larger and smaller number of requirements. So larger size but smaller number of investments, which can be more concentrated bets. Great. To my last question for today, how much of a fund allocation / investor money is driving this industry today? Is it driven by a wall of money that's flowing, or is it driven by real value at the moment? So how is it? Is there a euphoria in the market about investing in AI-driven companies or AI-focused companies? I know, Manish, you pointed out that there are companies who are using AI as a better one. But the general market, what do you see? How do you see it as? Starting with you, Manish.
I think can't talk too much broadly about the market. Obviously, at this point of time, we are seeing a lot more funds having liquidity, so the market is a little bit on the high right now, if you will. These are all cyclic things, right? You get into it and then you come out of it, then you get into it again.
Right.
But I can talk about our fund, right? Our fund, most of it actually, in the fund one, we have done one space sector. Rest of them are actually AI-powered companies because of the way we are designed in our thesis. And we are seeing, our companies, I think, let me just do the math, have raised around $65 million in the last 4 or 5 months. This is follow-on funding.
Wow.
And across the 4 or 5 companies that I'm talking about, right? So obviously, there is plenty of money available. I think one of the things that has worked for us, and we are seeing more and more, is that since we come in early, and can we help create a business narrative out of primarily a technology narrative that a company which is sort of a deep tech company or a very AI first company is, and then it unlocks not just deep tech or AI investors, it unlocks a whole lot of investors, because again, you are investing in a business, not necessarily a technology.
Okay, William, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sorry, what was the question again?
So I was saying that how much of this the talk about AI technologies is driven by fund allocations, or we see there's a lot of liquidity around in the current markets. We're seeing that happening in all sorts of investment areas, including listed markets. So how much of the current AI trend is driven by money / asset allocation from funds, or how much of it is? So are we in some sort of a bubble area already?
Yeah, I think you can look at. We talked about this a little bit before, but AI is a technology that can solve challenges that previously could not be solved, right? So I don't know whether I think you see a lot of LPs as they're giving the GPs the money. They want to be involved in hard tech or deep tech. They want to be involved in tech-driven change. And so AI is definitely a focus, along with biotech and some blockchain. These are definitely enabling technologies that are transforming and sometimes revolutionizing very, very large industries. So I wouldn't say that the asset allocation is to AI, but to this big theme of tech-driven transformation. And so you can see it in fintech, and so there's companies focused on the fintech side. You can see it in actually food tech and agri-tech. You can see it in space, and it's really an enabling technology. But I wouldn't say it's like, oh, we're going to be putting all our eggs behind the AI basket. I think it's more like we're looking at these very large industries that are being transformed by technology, and how can we make sure that we're positioned to capture the upside there.
All right. And like in consumer companies or consumer tech companies, we saw one big investor like SoftBank coming in and kind of invested a lot of them in large chunks. Do you see any single player or single investment house doing that in the space? William?
Yeah, I think sure. I think well, you're getting a bit of a two parallel tracks. So you have kind of like the travel track, China track, and you have the rest of the world track, and they're not really overlapping so much. We don't see a lot of global investment into China AI-driven companies. We don't actually see that much China investment outside, mostly because of governments like the U.S. blocking China investment. So I think we've got two parallel development tracks, and where we're positioned in terms of cross-border, we're trying to see what's best in both, and to some extent, we're doing a cross-border innovation arbitrage. So take the best from the West and see whether we can apply it to China and vice versa, without getting into any IP or governmental restrictions. And so we'll see how that works. Right now, it's a bit too early to tell.
All right. So that's very insightful. Vijay, any thoughts on, or do you see any queries from investors as such? Or do you see any, or too many queries coming on from investors for checking on the IP side? I'm just checking if there's a bubble in the industry or not yet.
Yeah, so I think one trend which I think the investors, so I don't get queries from investors. I get queries from the startups and the companies I consult for. So one trend which I've seen is patent trolls going after startups and the ecosystem. So one case was the Mycroft case, which was, the company's name is Mycroft Inc. So they are the largest open source voice-related technology platform in the world. They were sued by a patent troll, and the patent, this was before the US court, and the patent number is patent number 679. So the patent troll's name is Voice Tech Corp. So when Voice Tech Corp went after this company, Mycroft, they thought that they will capitalize from the IP they own. But what Mycroft did was they challenged the patent using prior art, and they went and invalidated the patent of this patent troll. So that's a good way of companies retaliating, because typically what happens is when there is a patent infringement case filed against you, and against startups or bigger companies, they generally settle it out. We have many examples across the globe. So in this case, Mycroft challenged the patentability of the patent of the company voice, this non-practicing entity. So what is a non-practicing entity? Non-practicing entities are entities which just buy patents and start filing patent infringement cases. So whether it is AI, whether it is any technology, this is a problem which the whole ecosystem faces. So this is a good example of how companies and startups have fought back against these patent trolls, because this money, if this money was like they had paid up for the patent infringement case, that patent money which they have settled could have been used against many other companies in the whole ecosystem. So what Mycroft did was to challenge it, invalidate the patent of the patent troll, and kill it at the source. So great examples in the global ecosystem from the Mycroft case. So which typically, startups go and settle it because it is cheaper to go and settle with these patent trolls.
No, but the question was that, is there any surge of these things or surge? See, generally money drives a lot of these things, and some of it,
yes,
it may be good money, bad money. In terms of good money, by that I mean good investments, bad investments. So, do you see any euphoria already, or just people just finding patents just for the sake, or?
Yes. So as I said, the investors should look for quality patents, not quantity patents. So if any company or a startup shows them a lot of patents, which is not higher in the stack, it's of no value. And also they should also look at, as I said earlier, they should see how this patents has been monetized by licensing, or as I said, open sourcing is also a good methodology, because if there are more users of this patented technology than it not being used by anybody, or just that startup. That is also a trend which Tesla, companies like Google also have shown us, where if you get more users to that technology, and for implementation, companies like Tesla and Google, or for enhancements on those platforms, their help is required. That's where they monetize. So there are various monetization methods. So just by filing patents, I would not invest in that company. I will also see whether they have been able to monetize each of those patents, because it's an investment if they just have their patents and they are not been able to monetize.
Understand. Okay. So
file for defensive strategy.
All right. So moving on, in the interest of time, we'll start with taking some question answers sessions for our viewers. So one of the questions which has come, a very specific question for William. What do you think is the scale of funds that are impacting the trends in these startups focused on AIs? So do you see, I mean, the viewer has asked a specific number. So is there a number of funds, or in terms of AUM, is there some huge amount? Like SoftBank had $100 million of a fund which they were focused on consumer tech companies. Any such fund that stands out to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, SoftBank Vision is one of the biggest. I'm just trying to look it up here, but anyway, you can look it up. But I mean, they have a stated focus on AI, right? They think that it's going to be transformational for just about every industry in the world. And if you look at they invested in 2 of our seed investments, like GetAround and Formlabs. I'm not sure if Formlabs is using AI or not, but they're on their fund too. The first fund was huge, 100 billion. And the second fund, they made some missteps, but over time, the COVID really helped them out, and they're seeing their numbers coming back, roaring back really strongly. So I think the capital at this point is I wouldn't say unlimited, but this is one of the largest focus areas, because taking data and driving that personalization and optimization can touch just almost every single industry, which is why AI isn't really a sector. AI affects all sectors.
Thank you. Quick question for you, Manish, from the audience. It's like a rapid fire question from Manish. So if you were to go back in time, what is the company that you would pick? You have to pick only one. Bitcoin as a research paper. Point of being, it's a great tech, but no traction at that point, say back in 2010-11. A Kunal Shah for Cred, who's founder with a great traction, coming up with a new idea, or something like a Clubhouse, which is huge traction, but doesn't have its own technology. Like it's using the Agora.io platform, but has got huge traction. So what would you invest in?
None of these things, but I will invest in the company that made that time machine.
Interesting. So it is like a rapid fire question. And I thank the audience for writing such a nice and detailed question. Say in interest of time, we have to close on shortly. So any parting thoughts from you, starting with Manish?
Not really. I mean, just that I think being on many AI panels, and I think the whole concept of this AI itself as a panel is broken in some ways. I think we should not lose this focus that it is a means and not the end. That's all.
Understand. William?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I think just back to basics, focus on that product market fit and don't give up. I mean, for a company like Touch, they went through many different applications before they found something where they could take their technology and really solve a problem. A lot of challenges are that you've got a lot of companies, startups, they start with the technology, but they don't have a problem to go with it. So it's tech in search of a problem is quite difficult. You need to bring that together. So if you're a pure technologist, try and find some business-minded people or industry experts, mentors that can help you, just understand what the challenges are that are out there. And vice versa. If you see challenges out there, go and search for technologists that can help you bring the technology to solve those. It's increasingly, startup is multidisciplinary. So you can't just be an amazing business person or a hardcore technology person. You need to have understanding across, and it's not just software. I mean, right now, many solutions require software plus hardware, and so plus medical, right? So it's these pretty complicated solutions that are really going to be making a change. And it requires teams. Individuals alone can't do it themselves. So make sure that you find great team members who have skills and expertise in areas where you're not strong, and come together, bringing together, again, there's multiple, whether it be like farming plus ag tech plus fintech, or health, plus AI, plus blockchain or whatever, and the teams that can bring these together into one solution to solve a big problem. Those are the ones that we're looking to invest in. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Viju, any thoughts?
Yeah, so my thought would be that startups should take the benefit of collaboration and projects. The foundation like Linux Foundation, which has the AI projects, there are some 27 projects globally, and this is done by companies, projects, and also by universities across the globe. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel, take the benefit of the collaborative effort of all these communities globally. So they are not just Chinese companies or US companies, they are companies across the globe. So there are 450 million lines of code which is already available on the Linux AI Foundation. And every 7 to 10 days, 1 million lines of codes are being written. So that's a lot of lines of code which these guys should take benefit out of and not reinvent the wheel, start from the scratch. And they also should look at defensive patent strategies, because finance, money is limited, whether for big or small company. So think from a defensive perspective also. File patents which are of top quality. If you feel that those patents are of not top quality, just file defensive patents so that nobody else can file a patent on that same segment, or publish a paper so that you at least get the credit for that work, but don't file for patents, because patent is a costly affair and it's a jurisdictional affair. So don't file for patents for stupid patents, don't file for stupid patents, file quality patents, and try to monetize those patents. Otherwise, there is no fun in filing patents.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Just to wrap up, I think when it comes to investing, the basic principles still lie. Product market fit, I think, is the key. We've also seen in the discussion that AI is not just a standalone industry. It's a technology which is being applied in all industries. Practically everything and everything you see will be affected by AI. So investing in AI has to be done with companies who already have a good product market fit and have offering solutions, because that AI technology that they have might give them the edge to be the winner in that industry. And with the IP laws in place, we need to kind of use them intelligently and not and it has to, as Biju said, not quantity but quality of IP has to be used properly. I think thank you very much, Manish. Thank you, William, and thank you, Biju. I think Varsha had connectivity issues, so she couldn't join back. And we thank the audience a lot for asking these interesting questions. And thanks to our speakers for giving the very insightful discussion today. There's a breakout session now at the networking sessions. So please join in there. And Sejal, can you please announce this details about the same?
Okay, thanks Anand, and thanks to all the speakers. I'm sorry, which one I'm going to please mute, I'm so sorry. So to avoid echo. All right, thanks a lot. So overall, I think I would just like to thank everybody to take out time for everybody for taking out time for the session. And I think specifically AI is really, really big. So, and there is enough for everybody. So I think I've already shared all the speaker links, so you can connect with everybody on LinkedIn, so you can know more about what they are doing, what exactly is happening in the ecosystem, and also IoT, so we can bring more such activities for you and just grow together. That's the main thing. So, all right, I think that's it. Thanks a lot for joining. And yes, so for everybody in this VIP lounge, once we end the session, you would be seeing the lounge area as well as the exhibitor booth area. So you can take a seat in the lounge area for networking and also visit the booths. All right, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Sejal. Thank you, Anand.
Thank you, Sejal. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, William.